Welcome back to SM Sports Radio, and the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 had just happened, and NC State is still going. It's one of the craziest March Madness runs we've seen recently, a double-digit seed making it all the way to the Final Four for first time in a while. So what do you think about this? Do you think that they're going to have enough to beat a Purdue team that right now is super hot with Zach Edey just showing why he's the best player in the country?
Well, honestly, I really don't have a feel yet for this matchup. I know that Zach Edey is the best player in the country, despite what everyone wants to say about how he's a free throw merchant, how he's only good because he's tall. The fact of the matter is, everyone, you're wrong about that. Zach Edey is easily the best player in the country, the most dominant presence inside in the country, and DJ Burns is a great player on the other side for NC State. But I'm intrigued to see how NC State is going to choose to guard Edey, because let's just be honest, everything runs through Edey in that offense, whether it be just getting him the ball on the block and him lay it in, or get fouled, or get it down to the block and him kick it out for one of Purdue's multiple shooters. Really intrigued to see how they handle him. They've been really good at shutting down opposing stars throughout this run. DJ Burns on the offensive side has been kind of a different type of postman in terms of he doesn't really play much with his back to the basket, and when he does, he kind of spins out of it and shoots a little floater with that left hand, and it's been money pretty much all tournament. Yeah, hardly ever uses the backboard, has some of the best touch I've ever seen from a big man. If you had a gun to my head right now and asked me to pick the winner of this game, I'd have to go with Purdue, but there's no ounce of doubt left in me of this NC State Wolfpack squad. Kevin Keatts has saved his job. He's earned himself an extension for good reason. This is a team that I honestly didn't even know if they were going to get out of the first day of the ACC tournament, as they were trailing to the Louisville Cardinals at halftime, which is just baffling to think about. That was less than 3 weeks ago, and now they're in the Final Four. So, yeah, definitely a magical run for NC State.
Yeah, absolutely crazy run for them. And one thing I'll be curious to see is, obviously DJ Burns has been playing so well on the offensive end down low, but usually on the defensive end, the guy that's been making a difference for them is Mohamed Diarra, who's really been playing excellent defense down low. So I'll be curious to see what the rotation is if they bring him around Edey. And Diarra's been such a great rebounder that I think he's probably the chance NC State has to not get absolutely dominated on the glass in this one, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Then your other Final Four matchup is UConn versus Alabama, and UConn has just been mowing through teams this tournament, whereas Alabama's had some more close, hard-fought games, especially the last two versus North Carolina and Clemson. So who do you like in this one? And then, obviously, as a Clemson student, what are your thoughts on the way the Tigers' run ended this year?
Yes, I'll preface this by saying if Alabama makes 16, 17 threes like they did against Clemson, then they're going to beat UConn. That's just the fact of the matter. I don't think they're going to be able to have the sustained success from the perimeter that they did against Clemson. Clemson had a few holes in their zone defense in the second half and missed some transition opportunities to defend. That's why we saw a guy like Jaden Stevenson, who averages 5 points per game, go off with 5 3-pointers. That was really painful to watch as a Clemson student. But Alabama is probably the only team up to this point that UConn will have faced that can actually give them a run for their money, just because of that high pace that they play with. They've faced the number one strength of schedule in the country, so they're used to playing really tough games. They're battle-tested, but UConn's just a different animal. I don't think this game is going to be particularly competitive in the second half. We might see a pretty competitive game in the first half like we saw between Illinois and UConn. I think this is another instance where UConn kind of gives the other team a nice and painful slow death in the second half like they did to Illinois with that 30-0 run. And then on the Clemson side, nothing to complain about really. Chase Hunter just had an elite tournament scoring the basketball. I think he was up around 20 points per game throughout that run, which was just, if you had told a Clemson fan or student that Clemson would have been in the Elite Eight coming into the tournament, they would have signed the papers and taken it. Obviously a pretty painful way to lose, especially late in that game on Saturday night, as he had a couple points where Joe Girard made some deep threes that you thought would get the Tigers back into it. But what did Mark Sears do? On the other side of the court, he would just answer immediately, just like you said. Both of those shots really with a hand in his face. Just incredible shot-making abilities all over that Alabama roster. And so, yeah, I like UConn over Alabama, and I'm pleased overall with Clemson's Elite Eight run.
Yeah, I would be too if I was a Clemson fan. That kind of came a little bit out of nowhere, especially for a team that a lot of people were picking to lose in the first round to New Mexico. But as far as Alabama, like you said, it's a team that shoots the three really well when they're on, and Mark Sears is the kind of a player that if he's having a good day, he can take over a game. So I think that is Alabama's only chance to be competitive and beat UConn is if Sears. I would say if Sears gets 30 or more, that's really the only way I see Alabama winning this game. But otherwise, I think UConn is just too good. I don't think Alabama has anyone that can handle Donovan Clingan down low at all. So I think UConn's going to dominate the glass in this one for sure.
Yeah, and then hypothetically, we're not going to have another show between now and the national championship game. Let's just say hypothetically we have UConn and Purdue. I think that would be a really intriguing matchup and one that would be a lot more competitive than some of UConn's games leading up to it, simply because Zach Edey's a guy that can match up with Donovan Clingan inside and give Donovan Clingan problems, maybe get him in foul trouble. That's been the main point of attack defensively for UConn. Other teams just have not been able to score at the rim because Donovan Clingan has been there to alter and block shots. But Purdue's kind of a different team. They're built with a dominant big man of their own in Zach Edey, who's better than Donovan Clingan. If you get it into him, get Clingan in foul trouble, that'll open up the shooters on the outside for Purdue, like Braden Smith and Lance Jones, all the other shooters they have on that roster. And so I think that game would be a lot closer. I think Purdue actually does have a fighting chance in that one, but can't pick against the UConn Huskies. So my prediction is that the UConn Huskies go back-to-back.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think they're going to be beating Purdue as well. I think Purdue's just a little bit too good with Edey down low for NC State to handle. If NC State somehow does manage to beat Purdue, I think they get absolutely throttled by UConn in the title game. There's nothing NC State can do about UConn in my opinion. But I think if Alabama manages to make the title game somehow, I would pick Alabama to beat Purdue or NC State just because if they're a team that's shot well enough to beat UConn, I definitely think they're beating Purdue or NC State at that point. So, but I think that's it for basketball this week. Is there anything else you want to add before we get into baseball?
Yeah, I'll pay my final respects to Creighton, a team that I was super high on. I thought they really had the pieces to make a run deep into the tournament. Unfortunately, that run came to an end in the Sweet 16 as they gave up an 18-0 run in the second half.
Yeah, experts say that's not ideal.
Definitely not ideal. Shots just weren't falling. They were turning the ball over. Zakai Zegler was just a pest guarding the basketball, and Creighton just had no answer for Tennessee in the second half. Connect dropped 26 points. But this will always be a Creighton team that will hold a special place in my heart just because they were so fun to watch. They were built on a solid rotation of 6 or 7 guys that the top 3 really played just about every minute of every game. Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Trey Alexander. I love their coach, Greg McDermott. I think he's going to rebuild that roster, and that program's going to be here to stay for the considerable future. But since that was my national title pick, I just had to lay the Creighton Blue Jays to rest. Maybe we'll talk about Creighton again when it comes to college baseball here down the road, as they're the host site for the College World Series.
Maybe, but yeah, Creighton was definitely a fun team to watch. I had them losing in my national title game, and we're not going to talk about who I had winning. But that is it for basketball. We're super excited to watch the Final Four this weekend and the national championship game. I'm hoping we get a more competitive title game than last year, but the way UConn is playing, that might be a bit difficult. But moving over into baseball, the regular season has finally started. And it was a good first weekend for me as a Reds fan. The Reds dropping 1 game to the Nationals, but winning the other 2, and Game 3 with back-to-back homers to walk off the game. Then on Monday, a Spencer Steer grand slam and extra innings beat the Phillies, which is a Braves fan I'm sure you were also happy about. But
yeah, thank you
I'm
for
just
that,
so excited baseball's back. It's been super fun to watch already.
Yeah, for sure. The Atlanta Braves, my squad, have gotten out to a nice start. It's always good to take 2 out of 3 from the Philadelphia Phillies, especially in Philadelphia to start the season, especially with the way the Braves' last 2 postseason runs have ended. It's nice to kind of reassert dominance over the Phillies like the Braves have in the regular season for the past 6 or so years, but hopefully that translates into an October run for the Braves. There's a long way to go before we get into that. but I thought we would make some picks for some awards here in this segment. And so we'll start out with the AL MVP. I'm going to go with Juan Soto. We talked about the Yankees. I talked about Soto in our MLB preview that we did a couple weeks ago, specifically of the AL. I think Juan Soto is going to have a monster season, both because he's an elite hitter, and second because that short porch in Yankee Stadium is just ripe for a lot of Juan Soto home runs. I think he's going to hit 40 to 50 bombs this season with relative ease. That is a pretty loaded lineup, especially in the middle with he and Judge there at the 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 spot. I can't quite remember where they have them
It's the
slotted.
2 and 3 right now.
Yeah, but definitely a potent lineup and a park ripe for a lot of Soto home runs. So he is my pick for AL MVP.
He is also my pick for AL MVP. I think that he fits this lineup like a glove. Anthony Volpe's had a hot start to the year, and then you know what you're getting from Aaron Judge. And although Juan Soto doesn't necessarily pull the ball in the air a ton, kind of goes to all parts of the field as a hitter, I still think he is going to be able to take advantage of that short porch, like you said, 40-plus home run season for sure, and I think he's really going to come into his own here in New York. Something that can be tough to do for a lot of players sometimes, that I think Soto's the caliber of player that's not going to buckle under that New York pressure at all and flourish for this Yankees team.
Yeah, for sure. And then over to the NL, I've got Mookie Betts as my NL MVP. He was oh so close last season up until the last month of the season just about, when Ronald Acuna Jr. just went on a tear, had a 40-70 season. Mookie Betts this season is on a tear of his own to start the season, pretty much carrying the Dodgers top of that lineup, as Shohei Ohtani really hasn't gotten going yet. Freeman's been pretty dependable, but in terms of power and consistency, it's been all Mookie Betts for the Dodgers and their lineup. I think he's going to have a monster season. I think this is the year where the MVP will be his of the National League.
Well, you mentioned the guy that I'm taking for NL MVP. I have Ronald Acuna Jr. going back-to-back. I think that although the top of that Dodgers lineup is so good with Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani, I think that Braves lineup is just so good top to bottom that Acuna really has protection no matter where he is, and I know the Braves love to use him in that leadoff spot a lot of the time. I think he's such an elite player, especially you look at him on the base paths as well last year with the 40-70 season. Well, I don't think he quite gets there. I still think he's looking in 35-60 range this year, so I definitely have him repeating his NL MVP, although I do think Betts will be right there with him.
Yeah, I can't argue with that much as a Braves fan, so I would definitely take that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. Then over to the Cy Young in the AL, who do you have? Well, who is that? Let's see. That looks like a player that I mentioned in our NL preview.
Yeah, it is. It's Cole Reagans of the Kansas City Royals.
Or AL preview, because the Royals don't play in the NL.
Yeah, I think we knew what you meant there. Cole Reagans kind of a guy that came up through the Royals system, not really as a highly touted guy at all, but has just been so impressive, especially from what I've seen out of him so far for the Royals. He had a very solid first start, and I think the Royals are going to be towards the top of that division, and because of those two things, I'm taking Cole Reagans. Who have you got?
I love that Cole Reagans pick. First, I want to say he's one of my favorite players in baseball, and I think you look at this Royals team who had a prospect like Asa Lacy, who was so highly touted when they drafted him as a starting pitcher, but who really has been hampered by injuries a lot, then Reagans has just come out of nowhere and been that guy. And shout out to him for setting a new Royals opening day strikeout record with 9. So great start to the year, and I would love it if he won the Cy Young in the AL, but I'm taking Luis Castillo of the Seattle Mariners. This is a guy who just consistently has elite stuff, and I think this year he finally puts a whole complete elite season together and gets it done. Honestly, I could see either him or Logan Gilbert getting this award from the Mariners. They're both so good, but I'm going to give the nod to Castillo right now.
Yeah, that Mariners rotation is certainly filthy, especially at the top with their top 3 guys. Over to the NL Cy Young, I'm going to go with a guy from my Atlanta Braves, Spencer Strider. He had an incredible season last year. The ERA was a little bit higher than would be expected. He gave up a few home runs, specifically off the fastball, as players would kind of just sit on that pitch since he really predominantly only pitched 2 or 3 pitches, but now he's added a curveball, And if you haven't seen Spencer Strider's curveball that he
Oh, it's
added
disgusting.
this offseason, it is disgusting. He's going to be striking out a lot of batters. I think he's going to have the most strikeouts in baseball, and I don't think it's going to be very close. The Braves are going to be the best team in baseball, and so a lot of times these awards kind of correlate with how the team does. So with that, I'm going to take Spencer Strider. I think he's going to have a big year. He's the ace for the Braves. They slotted him in opening day to get the start. Behind him, you've got Max Fried, Chris Sale, and Charlie Morton. And then at the five slot, you've got Reynaldo Lopez. So a great rotation top to bottom. And Spencer Strider is my NL Cy Young pick.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have Strider as well. Like you said, that curveball is just absolutely devastating, especially when you see the videos of it overlaid with his fastball. I don't know how you're ever going to get a hit off this guy. It's absolutely ridiculous. And he was already such a good pitcher. Now adding that as well, just another pitch to be able to tunnel and just make him even more elite in that ace role for the Braves. So I have him as my NL Cy Young as well. Then over to Rookie of the Year. Who do you have for the AL?
Yeah, so there's a Texas Rangers player who will get a lot of hype from my co-host here, and who is certainly a great player. It's incredible that he made the opening day roster. But I'm going to take his teammate in Evan Carter. Evan Carter is a guy who was called up midway through last season, so he's eligible still for the award this season. He was pivotal for the Rangers on their run to the World Series, especially down the stretch in the regular season, but even in through the playoffs. I'm going to take Evan Carter to win Rookie of the Year, and he might get outshined by his teammate that Micah is going to talk about, I think.
Yeah, I'm going Wyatt Langford. I think anyone who saw the last couple episodes of the pod knew that was happening. Love Wyatt Langford so much. He's crushed every single level of pitching he's ever faced. And then I don't think people realize how good his speed tool is. If you pull up the StatCast of sprint speed, he's in the top 10 players in all of baseball, which is absolutely ridiculous for a guy who's viewed more as just a pure hitter. And I think he's a lot more than that. He's going to be a great threat on the bases as well. I think possibly a 25-30 season for him as far as homers and stolen bases this year as a rookie, which would be absolutely crazy. But yeah, definitely Wyatt Langford for me. And I don't know, did you see the video of him trying to make it all the way to home on a grounder to short?
Yes, I did. That was
almost
pretty cool.
Had it. I think if he would have fully committed and slid head first, he might have gotten there. But I love the hustle either way. Super entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. Love to see that out of the rookie.
Yeah, so then who do you have for NL Rookie of the Year?
I'm going to go with Shota Imanaga. He's a very old rookie, 30 years old, but in his first outing, he pitched 6 innings, got 9 strikeouts. We didn't really have a problem walking guys or giving up too many hits. He's a Japanese import that kind of goes under the radar because of guys like Yoshinobu Yamamoto just getting all the hype, the big contract from the Dodgers. I think the pressure is going to be a little too much for Yamamoto this season. I think he's going to have a solid season, but not a season that really will immediately live up to the contract that he signed with the Dodgers. So I'm going to take Shota Imanaga to have a quiet season that's worthy of the NL Rookie of the Year.
I like that pick. I definitely think Imanaga is going to be good, and he looked great in his first start for the Cubs, so I could definitely see that happening. But for me, it's going to be Young-Ho Lee of the Giants, who is started off really well, hit his first home run, and got doused in a beer bath on a shopping cart afterwards, which was funny to see. But I just think this guy's such a good hitter, and he's a plus defender as well, so I just think he has so much upside for this Giants team that I do have picked to win the NL West. And like you said, the teams that win their divisions oftentimes correlate to these awards. So because of that, give me Young-Ho Lee for NL Rookie of the Year. Before we move on from baseball, there's one guy I did want to give a shout-out to. It is Ronel Blanco of the Houston Astros, who threw the first no-hitter of the season already against the Toronto Blue Jays. And this is a guy who didn't even know he was going to be on the opening day roster with a couple weeks to go until opening day. So massive credit to Ronel Blanco. It's super impressive to do that in just his 8th Major League start. So shout-out Ronel Blanco, and what a way for the Astros to get their first win of the year.
The Astros need to be stopped. How do they keep coming up with these guys that just know how to pitch and get wins and no hitters? It just needs to be studied and needs to be stopped. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, same.
And then moving on, if you've been watching our podcast from the beginning, you'll know that our resident NFL draft expert, Micah Farmer over here, my co-host, has been pretty high on a guy that maybe other people that are more casuals have not so much been high on, and that's JJ McCarthy. He's really turned some heads of NFL scouts. There's some smoke to the rumor that there might be something to him there might be something to the Commanders drafting him at 2. And so we're going to just break down whether we think that's a realistic possibility. I'll let you lead it off, Micah.
All right, so obviously I like JJ McCarthy as a prospect back in January when he was getting first-round hype and people were saying, I wouldn't draft him until day 2. At that point, I was like, no, this is a guy that's going to be a top 15 pick because of how the NFL draft works. And now you see him getting hyped to go as high as number 2. I don't think he goes quite that high because smoke screens are a thing. There was a period a couple years ago where everyone thought Mac Jones was the pick at 3 to the Niners, and obviously that didn't happen. So I think that the top 3 in this draft, the Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels trio, is definitely your first 3 picks off the board. I don't know if the Patriots will stay and take third QB there, but I think at least a team trades up to do that, and Daniels will be the third QB off the board. But McCarthy, I think, is definitely that next QB because below him you have the Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. that are older, and then for Penix you have the injury concerns. But I definitely think McCarthy sits right there in the middle, and I would not be shocked at all to see a team like the Vikings or the Broncos trade up to the Chargers spot at 5, or maybe the back half of the top 10 with a team like Atlanta, who now has their quarterback, to trade up and draft McCarthy in that range. But although I do think that, I just don't think this is a guy that's going to go top 3. I like him as a prospect, but I don't think he's quite that good.
Yeah, you mentioned the Minnesota Vikings. One thing I saw that was pretty interesting as I was doing a little bit of preparation, just scrolling on Twitter, I saw at BetMGM the line for the Minnesota Vikings to select JJ McCarthy moved from plus 500 to plus 100, which is pretty much even money that you would get back on your bet if JJ McCarthy were to be picked by the Minnesota Vikings. So it seems like there might be some credibility to the fact that that could be a landing spot potentially for JJ McCarthy.
The thing I think with the Vikings that's making it trend that way for McCarthy is they acquired a second first-round pick in the back part of the first round, and usually when you see a team do that, it's to get more ammo to trade up. So I think that's what the Vikings are doing here. And as for McCarthy himself, we're going to dive into him as a player a little bit here, so you guys you actually know why we're thinking this about him. So this is a guy who is an elite athlete. He's very fast, very big arm. I know his arm strength can be a bit underrated at times, but this is a guy who has a really good arm, probably top 3 in this class. I would say he's after Joe Milton and Caleb Williams. He's right there in that Drake May, Jaden Daniels arm tier in that second gap there. He's also really, really fast, probably the second fastest QB in this class after Jaden Daniels. And as far as his skills as an actual quarterback, he's shown the ability to make the big throws in games. If you turn on the Ohio State tape from this year, that was a game where he really made a lot of good throws in. And then it's just that the Michigan offense didn't need him to push the ball downfield a lot of the time because when Michigan would throw, it was usually on third down and usually in 3rd and 5 or longer. And because of the strength of the Michigan run game, they were not in those situations very often. So that's why you see McCarthy with like 10 to 15 attempts in a game, which a lot of people like to say, oh, they don't trust him to throw the ball. No, it's just because they don't have to throw the ball. You're not going to sit back and shotgun all day when you have an elite run game and possibly the best offensive line in college football. But when McCarthy was asked to throw, he was good at it. He has great accuracy on the run. His accuracy from the pocket can be a bit spotty at times. It's stuff like that that makes him a little bit more of a raw prospect, not as ready-made of a guy, where sometimes it weirdly looks like he's more accurate on the run than from the pocket, and then sometimes his footwork in the pocket can be a little questionable, kind of running up into sacks or dropping back into bad situations. And then he also has some characteristics that you want to work out of him as a pro, like kind of what we saw with a young Jalen Hurts, where he would look to run before looking to throw a lot of the times, or a young Kyler Murray. So I think if you can get that stuff worked out with McCarthy, he's going to be a good player, but there's so much upside to him. I definitely think he deserves to be a top 10 pick because of it.
Yeah, definitely. And Micah hit on a lot of key strengths of JJ McCarthy, a couple things that I just wanted to mention. Based on what I've seen and just consensus from what I've read about JJ McCarthy, the biggest thing is that he's elite in throws to the middle of the field. He struggles a little bit on passes outside the numbers. He's got a lot of different route concepts that could fall under, but definitely elite over the middle. He's good at throwing with velocity into tight windows. And the biggest thing for me about McCarthy, traits and skills aside, is that the man is a winner. 27-1 in college as a starter, national champion. Yes, he was behind an incredible offensive line at Michigan, had a great head coach in Jim Harbaugh, who's now in the NFL with the Chargers. But this is definitely an underrated prospect in terms of the public eye, and definitely a guy who I agree with Micah that he will be drafted within the top 10. So super excited to see where JJ McCarthy lands. And so, comment down below where you think he's going to land.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get any of those people saying, "Oh, this guy's a second-round pick. I'd never take him day one," because it's happening, even if you don't like it. But
True.
I thought it was interesting what you said about his throws over the middle of the field versus outside. He's kind of an inverted Michael Penix in that way, to where Michael Penix is great at those high-velocity throws outside the numbers, but then when you ask him to throw over the middle with touch, he can struggle at times. So that, at least to me, is kind of an interesting aspect of those two players. And then as far as him being a winner, it's funny because QB wins as a stat are pushed so heavily, and there is some value in them, but I personally don't. When I'm scouting a quarterback, I don't look at, does their team win? But what's weird about that is NFL teams like QBs that win, and even if I don't look at it, NFL teams do, and their opinion's a lot more important than mine. So what you said about him being a winner, I think, is going to drive him up boards, even if I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy. But
yeah, I'm not really a wins or a QB stat guy either. I just thought I would throw that in there because I thought that was something that would be valued. But definitely in my opinion, wins are not a QB stat at all.
Yeah. Well, that is it for our little JJ McCarthy segment. Our last bit, as we always do, we're going to talk about our favorite teams in college baseball for about 3 minutes. And for me, Florida, another weekend series win after getting smacked by Florida State during the week. It's typical 2024 Florida baseball. You lose the midweek game, you win the weekend series, you stay in the top 7 in the rankings, and then you go to Omaha and you hopefully win the whole thing. So it's really weird to keep losing these midweek games and then look amazing on the weekend, but it's working, so I guess I can't really complain too much. Then as for Auburn, getting swept by Texas A&M and losing a 12-inning game, that was absolutely brutal for the Tigers. Just the pitching is still an issue for Auburn. They need to get that worked out if they're going to win consistently in an SEC that is as tough as it is. And it doesn't get any easier for Auburn because this weekend they welcome Tennessee into Plainsman Park. So hope that goes a bit better than the A&M series, but it's definitely going to be tough for Auburn.
Yeah, and then in terms of my Tigers, the Clemson Tigers, Clemson traveled this past weekend down to Miami to face the Hurricanes and lost a heartbreaker in Game 1, gave up a walk-off home run after leading for most of that game, lost that one 3-2, but then bounced back and won the Friday and Saturday games. You had an unconventional Thursday, Friday, Saturday series to avoid playing on Easter, but Clemson was able to come away with 2 out of 3 down there in Miami, and the Tigers are on a 50-6 pace, which would just be absolutely elite. You have a lot of teams in the top 10, top 15 that already have more losses than that, but the Tigers sit at 25-3, looking to return to Omaha for the first time since 2010. Definitely, as a Clemson student, I am hoping that they do just that. Aiden Canuck has been incredible as the Sunday starter. Saturday guy Tristan Smith he's unavailable for a few weeks. No injured list in college baseball. I almost slipped and said on the injured list for a few weeks. He has a sprained ankle. But if the Tigers can find some stability in that rotation, this is definitely a team that you will find in Omaha come June, and definitely a team who 1 through 9 can beat you on the offensive side.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think college baseball is going to be really fun this year. A lot of really good teams at the top there, and then it's really just, can anyone consistently beat Arkansas? Because right now they look like an absolute wagon, but we'll have to see later in the year. But that is it for this week of SM Sports Radio. A little bit of a shorter episode this week as we kind of hit that transition period between March Madness and the start of baseball season. But that is it, and we will see you guys next week.